IGN released nearly 18 minutes of brand new gameplay footage on Chrono Odyssey. In this video, they show all the content types that will be available in Chrono Odyssey, along with some new UI features as well as gameplay. If you haven't seen the video yet, I will leave a link down in the description below, but let's go ahead and get started. The first little snippet here, I just want to show the full map of Chrono Odyssey. You can kind of see that the continent that we're going to be playing on, it looks pretty big. It has various regions that are broken out. Like on the far left side here, it says the Cliff of Titans, and then you also have, I think it says River of Scales. I can't really quite make that out. And then you have the Black Wall, the Deep Cut, various regions that we will be able to visit, or these might be areas for future expansions. The first piece of content that we see are dungeons, and these are up to 5-player like dungeon activities that we can do. And they're kind of going through and showing what this looks like as, I believe, a swordsman, a berserker, and a ranger. And if we look at some of these UI elements, we will see a few different things. A few of the UI elements in the bottom left, it'll show you have some health potions. It looks like some food and mana potions. I believe that this game is gonna function somewhat similar to that of Lost Ark, where everyone has healing available to them in the form of potions. It'll just be limited by cooldown and quantity. In addition, we can see that in the top of the UI elements, we have these little buff bars down here. Again, it has what looks to be like a food buff, and it has a duration that's remaining here. It looks like you have a movement speed buff that's also available. And then we see which weapons are currently available. In this case, the ranger has a crossbow and a bow, and they can swap freely by pressing Q. And then of course you have your skills that are going to be available. In this case with Chrono Odyssey, you have 4 skills that you can equip per weapon type. It's a little different compared to something like New World, which had 3 skills available per weapon equipped. So the one thing I noticed immediately about the ranger is that they have these arrowheads for the bow. This is kind of like an ammo resource, and the thing about these arrowheads is that the icon for them actually changes depending on, I think, what's different element types. You will use these different arrowheads as additional resources for your skills, it looks like, because as you see here, the ranger's going to use an ability, and it's going to call down a giant arrow and consume one of those arrowheads once it gets used. So again, it looks like this is a resource type that regenerates over time. Looks like it's pretty quickly, but again, right here, it looks like the arrowhead changes its icon type. I'm not sure if that's an element. I'm not sure what actually changes that, but it's just something that I noticed immediately. You can also see here that the ranger has some sort of buff that's applied with a counter underneath. I'm not sure if that means that it's going to have like an enhanced auto attack power or something like that for 4 attacks. But we also get to see a little bit of the swordsman gameplay and UI elements. The swordsman is a little bit more of a tanky character. You have a sword and shield equipped and a dual blade setup. And again, with the UI elements, you see that the swordsman has a bunch of buffs. It looks like in the middle here, they have what looks like a defense buff. That's going to probably increase how much power or how much damage they're able to block. And one other element that I forgot to mention is in the bottom right here, it looks like we have a couple special skills. I'm not exactly sure what these are. This one looks like it might be a taunt specific to the sword and shield build. So there might be some unique abilities that are available to each class that further enhances their kind of roles within the Trinity system. So if a sword and shield is supposed to be more of like a tank build, then this taunt is going to allow you to play more into a tank subclass. And then continuing on, we see a little bit more gameplay for berserkers. This case, the berserker is using a great axe and dual axes, and we just saw that this great axe player was able to throw their great axe. So it looks like berserkers will have a bit of a ranged option. It also showed there that there was a headshot modifier. Let me see if I can get that just right. So it looks like, I'm not sure exactly how that triggers, because it looked like this person just threw the axe and it just exploded and you got a headshot modifier. I don't know if that also means that rangers will also have headshot modifiers. Having weak spots is going to make for much more active gameplay. So that should be pretty fun. One additional thing that we get to see in this little clip here is some of the more actions that you can take in combat. So like in this case, you see a parry right here, and it leaves a wide opening for you to kind of land attacks on enemies. So I think that's really cool. I wonder what the window for something like that would look like. The next thing I wanted to showcase a little bit are some of the boss UI elements. So in this case, we're facing off against Bleth, and it looks like we have their health bar in red, and we have an orange bar underneath. And I think the orange bar is kind of like their posture. So as players are hitting it, you can kind of see that both are dropping over time. And I'm not entirely sure what will happen when the stagger bar drops entirely, but we do see that in this case, it looks like the boss is charging up for a major attack and a third bar appears. And I think this third bar is almost identical to that of the Lost Ark boss stagger mechanic, where you have to do a certain threshold of damage or stagger damage specifically to break them before a major attack lands. So this will probably mean that certain classes have attacks that are really good at building stagger and stuff like that. Next up, we get to see some of the world quests, and this is going to be a type of content where you just simply just run out into the open world and complete certain objectives, very typical in MMOs. And in this case, it looks like the players are taking out an encampment of Deathless. These are undead enemies. And we get to see a few different things with berserkers and rangers here. So we see that the berserker here is showcasing a few different attacks. Specifically, it looks like this berserker is using ice element. And one of the things I noticed immediately is just how long some of the weapon cooldowns are. So like in this case with the great axe, you have one attack that was over 40 seconds in cooldown, and then another one that's also pretty substantially long. So this is why swapping weapons is going to be so important. Then we swap over to the ranger once again, and in this case, they're using a crossbow, and we get to see this stance called rapid fire stance, where the crossbow player is able to very quickly shoot. It doesn't look like they're able to use any other skills in this stance, but they're able to pump out consistent damage otherwise. The next form of content that we see are time portals, and these allow players to transport in time to either the past or the future. And when you're in these worlds, you face off against different enemies and have to complete different objectives. Once again, this is a party-based content, so you can group up with your friends. And also, when you're in this time portal, you also have access to rare materials that you will be able to gather. And I assume these materials are sometimes limited to time portals, so this is likely going to be a required type of content that you must complete in order to progress. The next form of content that we have are field bosses. This is another form of open world content. You can group up with friends to come and fight these different field bosses and acquire some rewards. And these fights look really fun. There's a few weak spots on these monsters that you are likely going to have to destroy. And again, this kind of reminds me more of Lost Ark, where certain fights have weak points that once you destroy them, it makes a fight significantly easier. So I really like this type of mechanic where it encourages players to focus certain parts of monsters to destroy them and make your lives easier. One other thing about the field bosses is that we actually got to see a little snippet of the ranger playing with a rapier, so we get to see a little bit of that gameplay. So it looks like very quick attacks here, but the thing that we notice the most right here is a parry stance. So this is probably gonna be more of a defensive weapon. But yeah, unfortunately we don't get to see a lot in the way of their attacks other than that parry. Then we have Void Nexus, which are these portals that pop up throughout the open world, and once you activate them, swarms of the void will come out and you have to defeat them. And once you kind of clear them, you will get rewards. And again, as you see players grouping up here, this will be another form of party-based content. So really the game is emphasizing small party sizes. So I really like this approach. I think it's a lot more social, I think is how I would put it. I prefer smaller content versus like guild versus guild content. So I'm really happy to see this direction. The other thing that this content does remind me of are the portals that you see in something like New World. I forget what those were actually called because it's been so long since I've played New World, but really this game is looking like a hybrid between New World and Lost Ark to me right now. Next, we have region bosses, and these are somewhat similar to field bosses, except they're just scaled up. You will have to deal with a lot more damage, it looks like, and a lot more mechanics. And in general, these are kind of bosses that are regional, like as the name implies. They are kind of the kings of certain domains. The next form of content are labyrinths. These are kind of puzzles that you will have to go through and try to deal with. They're jumping puzzles. There's kind of avoid the rocks and stuff like that. And I think there will be some combat scenarios in this case. So like you can see in this clip right now, the player will have to go prone and crawl underneath this laser beam. One quick note about the crawling animation is that it doesn't look very smooth, in my opinion. It looks like you're just kind of sliding across the ground. So I know that this game is very much still in the works, so animations are subject to change, but this is just immediately one thing that catches my eye. It doesn't really look that complete. And also this little flamethrower, its animation, it just literally disappears, so I don't think it looked very smooth there. So just a couple things that I noticed immediately in this type of trailer. So this is just showing some of the puzzles that you have to deal with. This is simply just a movement based puzzle where you have to dodge as your platform moves, and then we have another symbol kind of matchup type of puzzle that you have to deal with, and then you have jumping puzzles, and we got to see a reveal of double jumping here. Again, similar to the crawling animation, I think the double jump animation needs a little bit of work. It looks like you are just, I don't know, suddenly hopping even though you're double jumping. I think there needs to be a little bit of a adjustment to the second jump animation. Moving along though, we get to see the bounty hunting system a little bit here, and similar to some of the other mechanics in this game, this reminds me a bit of New World with the town boards. So you'll take a mission to hunt a certain target, and then you'll go to a location and hunt them down, and then you have to go and slay them. So in this case, we're going to be seeing a ranger player who's using the crossbows and rapier. They're going to start off this engagement against the bounty target with a root attack. We actually got to see this animation recently in some of the Chrono Odyssey shorts for the ranger. It looks like this root attack does actually briefly root the enemy, and it does some ticking damage. It's a really cool animation. I'm a pretty big fan of that. And then we also got to see the crossbows do this little like nimble like overhead jump. It looks really sick. It also looks like it has actually, I'm not even sure if that's a jump animation or if it's a skill that they use for that. It doesn't look like it drained any stamina, so it might have been one of their skills. And then we get to see this player finish off the enemy with a flourish as they kind of or a flurry of stabbing attacks from the rapier. So again, like I think it's a really cool combination. It looks like the crossbows and rapier will be like a very nimble weapon combination. And then we move into some of the PvP. I know a lot of players are a little mixed on PvP. I'm pretty excited for it. The thing that we know about PvP so far is that it's not going to be forced. So this case, these are probably players who are out in the open world doing some questing, but they're flagged for PvP. So this means if two players are flagged and you're out in the open world, you will be able to fight each other. This is very similar to how New World handled it. And I think this method is actually really fun. It was one of my most enjoyed aspects of the New World play process. So I do think that this is a healthy compromise to kind of let players opt into the type of content that they want to do. Next up, we get to see trials, and this is a form of roguelike type of content where you have to progress through different puzzles and you have to deal with different types of encounters, and upon doing so you will power up your character, and as you kind of complete this type of content, you'll eventually unlock additional rewards. Some of these rewards look like they are permanent character perks, such as the first thing that we see here is this elixir of enhanced protection. So it looks like you buy this for 50 trial tokens, it says. So this is probably the rewards for completing various trials. And when you acquire this potion, it increases your physical defense and max HP permanently. In this next section, we get to see some of the life skills that are available in Chrono Odyssey. So right now we have a player here fishing, and then across the river you can actually see a player skinning some wolves that they have slain. And then here we see some players mining some ore, and then another one harvesting or chopping down a tree for some lumber. Next up, I want to talk about the Chronotector, and we saw how this progression system is going to work a little bit. I called it correctly in my recent video. I don't know if this was actually confirmed at the time, but based off of some of the descriptions in Discord, it would kind of showcase that some of these additional sentinels are going to be act as characters for progressing our character. I thought it was going to be Petra and Elan, but it looks like in this case it's Leviona. She's gonna be able to increase our Chronotector's abilities and give us additional strength. So we can see here that this is our Chronotector, and we can invest in different powers. So first we have isolation, reversal, resistance, summon, and tune. So looking at reversal here, this is an ability that lets us kind of save our current health state and position, and then we can walk around and return to our saved position at like a little bit later. So it's like a really powerful repositioning tool. So then here we can see that what gets enhanced when you level this up is it increases time reversal's duration by 5 seconds. And then when we go into resistance, we get to see that it increases temporal resistance duration by 5 seconds. I'm not very sure what that means, but more importantly on this screen we see the points or the currency that's going to be required to actually upgrade our Chronotector. It's gonna require enhancement points. I'm not sure if that's just a placeholder name. My assumption is that is the case, but still it's interesting to actually see this progression system actually showcased. And then now we get to see some of the different abilities. So this is time stasis, where you actually stun enemies and just lets you really unleash. This is time reversal, so you see that the character jumped down and then they were able to return back up to that cliff after landing a strong attack. Something else that we can do is summon specters. So we can see here that this guy is now fighting for us. We will talk about how we acquire these specters in just a moment. The other thing I wanted to note is you can't really see it because the IGN logo is blocking it, but we can see that this icon down here where my cursor is, this is actually what our Chronotector cooldown is. So as you can see, it's now active. It has this little yellow ring around it as we're doing damage. And then once that ends, it'll go on cooldown. And it's important to note these Chronotector abilities have insanely long cooldowns. So the Summon Spectre, it has a 5-minute cooldown. So very long cooldowns, but very powerful skills. Next, I mentioned that we get summons. The Chrono Gates are going to be solo content for us to go in and fight these hard bosses, and once you defeat them, you will actually acquire them as future summons for you to use to help you in future conflicts. I think these bosses are like the most reminiscent of that of like a Dark Souls boss. So I think it's really interesting how they managed to design something like this inside of a MMO type of game. I'm really excited for these Chrono Gates. I think some of these bosses look really cool. So then we just get to see a few different bosses that we're going to be able to fight in these Chrono Gates. Looks like this boss summons some ads that we have to deal with. And yeah, there's just a lot of really cool things that they're doing with these bosses that I'm very excited to try out. And finally, the last form of content that we were shown is Eden. Eden is a PvEvP type of realm. It's like an extraction type of content. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. So you'll have to go into this realm, and as you fight monsters, you'll acquire different gear, and you can use that gear to continue to progress into deeper realms and acquire better loot. And you will have to occasionally deal with other players, and if you lose or if you die, your gear that you've acquired in this time it seems like it's the gear that you've acquired in this zone specifically will disappear. Anyhow, that's going to be it for this recap of the 17-minute gameplay walkthrough posted by IGN. I'm even more excited now for Chrono Odyssey after seeing this. I had some questions about what some of the gameplay was going to look like. This answered a lot of the questions I think we had, so I'm very pumped. I can't wait for June 20th. I hope I'm able to get into the closed beta. So yeah, if you like this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe, because I will definitely be posting more Chrono Odyssey content in the very near future. But this is GooberTroy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.